Hi, this is Mari Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness. Thanks for joining us today for this expert interview. Today, my guest is Michelle Spehr, and we're actually continuing the conversation that we started that you can see in another video. And our topic is mindful leadership. I think you'll enjoy this continued conversation and find many of the aspects of how mindful leadership is an essential skill for today's leaders. Can you talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a mindful leader?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love, and I brought a copy of it just so I could show, a recent book that came out. I know I shared this with you, The Mind of the Leader. Yeah. Rasmus Hogard and Jacqueline Carter wrote a lot about what skills do leaders need in the 21st century to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And they really found that there's three. Mindfulness is one of them. Compassion and selflessness. And what's fascinating about it is they said our concept of an effective leader is outdated. So the MBA, it's coming in and it's going to take over. And while you need skills to manage budgets and all of that, really creating human-centered workplaces, it's a global movement.
Right.
And having those skills as a leader to create a human-centered organization and integrating those three capacities is what leaders need to be successful moving forward. So that's very inspirational for me. And the best part about it is they said all of it can be trained and learned.
Well, it's good to know that it can be trained. So then we may all have to start with the beginner's mind, but at least there's some skills that we can learn. But so why is this mindful leadership important, and why do we need it then?
Well, it's interesting. Some of the research that they did, they talked to, I think, some 35,000 leaders across the globe. And many of them felt that they are not mindful on a regular basis. And a large percent want to be more mindful. But I think even more telling is this leadership crisis that we have. One of the statistics that really stood out for me is that, check this, because I don't want to get it wrong, but 65% of employees would forego a pay raise to see their leader fired. So if you think about that, if you're a leader, that says a lot. And I know many of your audience may have read some of the Gallup work, and employees aren't necessarily engaged. And so as leaders, what can we do to help change and reverse that? So I think that's important, but maybe even a bigger aspect is just what our work environment and our daily lives are like. And one of the things that Rasmus and Jacqueline talk about is this concept of the paid reality. And if you don't mind, Mari, I'd like to share one of the other slides with you.
Sure, let's take a look at that.
Yeah, this is really fascinating because what we're seeing is that in day-to-day, we experience pressure. We're always on. So we have, our 24/7, 365. Information overload is the I part of it, and being distracted. And so in this, paid reality, we need the skills to really focus and to be aware and to not be distracted. And so as we look at, leadership moving forward, and all of us, regardless of what position we're on, this is our reality these days. And there's so much more science that says we can train our brain so that we can be more effective in this paid reality.
Yes, it is very exciting. And the fact that there is so much science that's emerging on this topic is one of the other things that is so important, because I think for a long time people have said, well, this is fluff, this isn't serious stuff, it's not going to really impact my business. And yet we're seeing that that's not the case. We see this in athletes, right? Athletes are a perfect example of the power of focus. They have peak performance times where they're, completely in the zone. And, we got all these words, in the flow, all of those things that describe that experience. But fundamentally, they're completely present in the moment. And, then when they are, on their rejuvenation part of their regimen, then they're, could be not quite so focused. So we've got lots of role models for this. And I think one of the key things is, that leaders have the opportunity to really be role models in their organizations for these skills and for what it means to be present. We've talked with some of our clients about establishing habits within, team structures where we put all of our distracting devices to the side when we come together so that we're honoring the relationship and the time that we're spending with each other. So, it's hard for some people to put that, cell phone on the chair next to the door or on the windowsill and leave it there while we're together. But it makes people much more efficient.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like there's small things that we can do, and maybe because they are so simple, people are like, can this really have an impact? I think some of the examples of organizations that are trying to build mindfulness practices into their culture have been a great example. One in particular is Aetna. I know they look at their meeting schedules, and they don't schedule them back to back. So their meetings might be 50 minutes instead of an hour, so that individuals have a little bit of space to leave the last topic behind and then really do focus on what's the new topic, or even take a break to use the bathroom and breathe and transition. But right. I think there is a lot that you can bring to the next meeting when you're going back to back, and
exactly. Yeah.
But I liked your comment about the athletes, because I think looking at it from a corporate athlete standpoint, is one word. I think that whole concept, like I said before at the beginning, is mindfulness a buzzword, or can we translate it in a way that individuals can connect to it? And I think a corporate athlete can be part of it, or a brain break. Can we give our brains a moment to just settle and refocus? The mind skills training, I think, is also another phrase that can help this be more of a concept that's accepted, because I think, like I said, there's misconceptions about it and what it is.
Are there any other examples of mindful leadership and how it's practiced in everyday business that you can share with us?
Well, there's a lot of things, even from the recent news, that I think kind of stand out for me. This concept of being on autopilot, or reacting versus responding, I think is one thing that we can see with the recent Starbucks issue, where actually one of the Starbucks managers called the police on two patrons who were there who hadn't ordered. And that led to a lot of training on, unconscious bias and how can we look at that. So that might be an example of where, this skill set, these competencies come into play of, can we see what's really in front of us, what's really there versus what we expect to see, what we hope to see. Another example I think that stood out for me was the Southwest Airlines pilot who recently had to have the emergency landing in Philadelphia. And I listened to the audio, and she was so focused and so calm, despite a situation that many of us would never be in, but the distractions that she had as she faced that situation, I think underscore and are a perfect example of the definition of, what it means to be fully present and to perform, under very distracted and very stressful situations. So, I think some of those that we just look at in the news kind of stand out.
It's a good way to think about it. I really appreciate those examples, because I think sometimes, certainly in most of us are not, flying airplanes and in situations where, a lack of focus can, or distractions can actually, have severe ramifications. Most of us are in different types of roles. But it's so important to remember that there are some individuals for whom, this has to be an essential part of their jobs. And, we talk about this in the safety elements in the workplace. When we think about safety training in the workplace, to a certain extent, safety training is a large part about being present, being aware, anticipating some of the things that are going on so as to prevent accidents from happening. So there's a real relationship here between our everyday lives and how we can really apply some of these skills.
Well, and I think that's why it was of such interest to me, having worked with employers in well-being. I guess I was surprised that there wasn't more emphasis on mindfulness,
Mm.
because employee physical health, the safety
Yeah.
aspect, the resiliency, all of that contributes to what does it mean to be well individually, and how does that contribute to the organization overall. So I felt like there was kind of this gap of that needed to be filled, or that could help us move the field forward in ways that could help people otherwise. And I think some of the research too, again, it really underscores how it can help the individual, it can help team, and it can help the organization. So
Great.
a lot to learn, but tons of possibilities.
So if our audience wants to connect with you, Michelle, where can they find you or find out more information about the work that you're doing?
Well, I love connecting with people who are interested in this, especially, the mindfulness area. And the best way to do that would be to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Great.
I would welcome that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. As always, I adore spending time with you. This is a fabulous conversation, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mari. I really appreciate it.